Hello and welcome, everyone. Today, my guest is Zeresenay Alemseged. Zeresenay is a professor at the University of Chicago. He's a paleo-anthropologist. He's going to tell us what that means. A scientist, a very renowned scientist. So, welcome to Tigray, Zeresenay.
Thank you, Teklay, for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. This has been a long time in the planning. Couldn't make it work until today, but today you have managed to make time for me. So thank you very much, Zeresenay. Thank you very much for that.
I want to apologize for keeping this long. I know you reached out to me a while back, but life is as such. It's been very busy. I know you're busy too, but I'm glad somehow we made it today.
But totally understand, and I'm so happy that we made it today, Zeresenay. I think I will start with how I came to know you. I think it would have been about maybe 10 or 12 years ago when you gave that TED talk on the, I think it was titled Origins of Humanity or something like that. You'll correct me later. And I was in Italy then, and I remember listening to you and getting the sort of goosebump experience, young Tigran in Italy listening to another Tigran and feeling some sort of, tribal connection. I think we get tribal on these matters. We don't know. I don't know why. Maybe you'll tell us later. But that is the first time I came across you. And since then, I have been sort of briefly following your work, generally what you do, not in detail because I don't have the expertise. But we're going to talk about the thing that you do for a living, Zeresenay. But maybe tell us briefly, what are you a professor of at the university?
Well, I'm really surprised that you would remember my TED Talk, which really dates back to over 10 years ago. Yes, I remember. It was a huge conference where they give you 18 minutes, and I had to deal with 6 million years to tell the history of humanity. And I remember some of the speakers were like Angela Merkel was there, the German counselor or chancellor, and Bono, the YouTube rock star, was there. So it was overwhelming. But at the same time, I managed to tell the history of humanity, but also said a few words that were poignant and very critical about Africa. Because as I said in that presentation, we Africans tend to worry a little too much about how we're perceived from outside rather than really determine how we perceive ourselves. A average Kenyan or Ugandan knows more about Paris, Tokyo, or New York rather than about the country which is next door. So in many ways, what I try to do is you come from this continent which is the origin of humanity, but you don't even boast about it. You actually pride yourself because you know more about New York or Paris. So I was trying to connect the past and present in that presentation, which takes me back to your question, which is I am a paleo-anthropologist. I'm a professor at the University of Chicago, and my primary job is really to find the thread, the origin that connects the 8 billion people that live on the planet Earth today. And that is, if you want to do that, then you would have to go back in time. When I go back in time, what you find are the fossil remains that are going to give you the different steps of evolution that since we became upright walkers distinctly from other creatures, we became this big-brained, very symbolic and very intelligent, but at the same time, very invasive species that we call Homo sapiens. So my job is really to look at, going back in time, look at what were the different stages of our progression before we became this very smart, invasive, but at the same time intriguing species that we are, called Homo sapiens. That's what I do, and it's really very exciting endeavor because it's not determined by countries, borders, frontiers. When I look at you, if you're now in Sweden, your neighbor, the white guy, is the same thing. It suffices to remove your skin and you'll be exactly the same thing. It will be very hard to separate you. So it's a it's a privilege actually to do what I do. But of course, I teach, I do research, I conduct field work, I train PhD students. So that's how I earn my bread, in short.
Well, we'll come back to some of the things that you do for research, and I'm going to inevitably ask you some stupid questions for sure. But how did the TED Talk come about? What were the sort of the finding that they wanted you to share? That if you could reminisce that experience.
Yeah. So the TED Talk, TED stands for technology, entertainment, and design. So most people there would be, actors, artists, philosophers, poets. Those are the mainstream speakers at TED. It's a high-profile platform, and you're given 18 minutes. But I got this email because I had published a Nature paper on my own discovery of Salam. And as you know, Nature is a prominent and prestigious journal, and my discovery was published on the cover page of Nature. I think that may have attracted their attention, and they reached out to me, would you like to speak to us? And I said, oh, yeah, of course. What do you want me to talk about? Well, they said about your discovery. But when you go to platforms like TED, you don't really detail the morphology, the shape, the anatomy, and all of that. That would not make sense to the average person. So your job and the challenge is to really know what you know of your own discovery, but connect it to the average person. So, for example, if you are a physicist and you have this fascinating discovery in physics or chemistry, you can say a lot about the hydrogen, oxygen, you can talk about the neutron, proton, electron, all of that. But you cannot go to a TED platform and detail those chemicals and compounds and molecules. What you need to do is, how is that relevant to the average person? If you really think about it, then, well, carbon is really relevant because most of my body is made of carbon. But how do you convey that message is a challenge. So my challenge was, okay, I have this 3.5 million year old child, which is the earliest child ever discovered in the history of paleoanthropology. And I happen to be the person to make that discovery as a young scientist at the age of 30 or 29, I remember. So what is the relevance? And what I tried to do at the TED Talk is, therefore, beyond what I see as a scientist, I tried to be the human, the person, and then relate to the average person, whether it is Angela Merkel or the janitor or Bono, the YouTube guy. Everyone listened to it, and I remember Bono came and gave me a big hug, congratulating me and saying it was a wonderful thing. And so I think primarily it's the publication of the scientific work, because that's what we do as scientists. I think someone must have seen the link between what happened in the past and today, which is what I do. But maybe they've seen that I may be the person to convey that message, connecting the past and the present. And I would say it was a success.
Well, yeah, I think in a way one of the central messages that you conveyed then, and I listened to the TED Talk then and yesterday as well as part of sort of preparation for this, and it's a brilliant presentation. And one of the central points that you made is that everybody, whether people who were in attendance or people who would listen to it online, came from the same sort of origin. That was one of the central messages you made, and you were speaking about Salam, and of course the other sort of the other artifact that people in Ethiopia know is Lucy. How again, this is a draft question, but how are they different, the two of them, Lucy and Salam?
Yeah, so Lucy and Salam belong to the same species. And the analogy would be, you, Teklay, and I belong to the same species called Homo sapiens. And Lucy and Salam belong to a species called Australopithecus afarensis. They both lived over 3 million years ago. They're both ladies, and they both were discovered in Ethiopia. But the difference is Lucy belongs to an adult individual, whereas Salam belongs to a 3-year-old child. Lucy was 40% complete when she was discovered, and now I'm talking about the skeleton that was recovered because not everything is preserved, whereas Salam was complete over 60%. Lucy, we did not have the face. They didn't find it. They found many parts of the rest of the skeleton. But in Salam, not only do we have the face, but we have many parts of the what we call postcrania, which is the lower part of the skeleton. So there are similarities and differences. But what made Salam unique is it belongs to a child, because children, as you know, their bones are not fully fused, fully formed. So when they die, they don't really get preserved because the scavengers love them because they are soft to chew. And when they get buried by rivers and lakes, they get too fragmented, too broken into pieces. So it's really a very rare combination of events that led to the preservation of Salam. So that is the similarity and the difference between Lucy and Salam. I think one fun thing is that when Lucy was discovered, I think Johansen, the American scientist who discovered her, was a young PhD. I think he was 30. And I was a young PhD. I was 30 also. So John and I make jokes sometimes about the discoveries. But coming back to the message, I think one thing that I tried to highlight is when you look at Africans today, they are mostly in wars. There is starvation, famine. I mean, you name it. But then it's also the continent where we, as a lineage, stood up and started to walk on two legs for the first time, unlike any other animal, any other creature. Even the closest relatives, we call chimpanzees, with whom we share over 98% of our genetic makeup, our DNA, they don't really walk on two legs like you and I. So it's Africa where people, for the first time, stood up and started to walk on two legs. That would free up their hands. Then they become stone tool makers, stone tool users. And that stone tool will give them access to very special diet, like animal resources, which then would help you expand your brain to become this smart and intelligent species that we are. So all of that is connected. And when you go back in time and look at human ancestry, everything that's older than 2 million years is 100% African. You do not find a single human remain outside of Africa that's older than 2 million years. Meaning, out of the 6 million history of our lineage, the first 4 million years happened in Africa. Even our species, Homo sapiens, was born in Africa. So for a continent that has contributed so much for humanity, and now to see us really fighting, killing each other, starving, is just unacceptable. So what I said is, we're looking at two types of Africa. The Africa that starves, that carries guns and fights, versus the Africa that could potentially flourish and really become a beacon of hope, given the diversity of biodiversity and environments and parks that we have in Africa. So my message was very simple. We have to choose whether we continue to be the Africa that is the potential for another upright, not walking now, but upright thinking, looking forward, or we can be the Africa that starves and is continue to depend on other countries, other parts of the world. In my opinion, there is no one to blame here. It's up to us. We have to have a positive attitude towards ourselves. As I say in my TED Talk, we need to have a positive attitude towards Africa. It's not enough to be educated as someone who can do miracles, but it's also important to look back and then say, well, what am I doing as an African? Am I inspiring at least the next generation? Am I trying to help the communities? Am I trying to say no when injustice happens, as we see it in Tigray? And all that needs to be, encapsulated in a new philosophical and ideological principles in order to take our people from the political and economic morass that they find themselves.
Well, indeed, you finished that presentation by giving people a serious challenge. You challenge people to imagine a more positive Africa, and you challenge people to create a more positive Africa. And in a twist of irony, the very place where you discovered that fossil has been an epicenter of a deadly war, the
Yeah.
Tigray war. And maybe later we'll come back to that, how that makes you feel for someone who is capable of, seeing the whole of humanity from a heightened vantage point, to see people killing one another in an egregious manner. I always wonder what that makes you feel. But maybe towards the end we're going to discuss that. But in terms of the timeline of evolutionary events, when you speak, 2 million years old, 3 million years old, how do you expect people to comprehend that sort of time frame? I think people find it very difficult to understand, what that timeline means, like to have an intuition of that. Is that something that you recognize as a challenge in your research field?
True. I think that's also legitimate. I don't think you can take that for granted and everyone would understand what a 3 million or 4 million years means, because the time dimension that we're used to, especially during the era of Facebooks and Twitter, is instant. So our brain now is actually geared to instant messaging. So when you tell people something happened 4 or 5 million years ago, it's legitimate that they are hesitant to comprehend. It takes time. And that's why I would really underscore that we must make sure that our children have a scientifically geared thinking, and that can happen only if we do it at the preschool, or at least in elementary schools. I am a member of a few academies. One of them is the American Association for Advancement of Sciences. The second one is the American Academy for Arts and Sciences. And these are very prominent academies that you can go into by elections where someone nominates you. But interestingly, I'm also a member of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences at the Vatican. Not many people know that the Vatican actually has the Academy of Sciences. And there are 80 members, and you're named for life. And what we do at the church, the Vatican, is really discuss human evolution. We discuss about, in fact, the last one was about stem cell research and how we can align, how the church can align its messaging with scientific facts, because it's very hard. In fact, they just published a monograph, and look what the title is the stem cell and their promise for regenerative medicine. This is published by the Pontifical Academy of Science, as you can see at the beginning, by the country. So what I'm telling you is the church is expanding, stretching its imaginations, because there is no way they can continue to survive by denying what science says, what the fact says. That's number one. So if people are having a hard time imagining 2 million years, I would invite them to imagine the origin of the universe, which is 14 billion years. So it's not something that you would inculcate by telling an adult, but I would find the answer by making sure that our children at schools, and I'm really currently thinking about Tigray specifically, our children must get the facts. What they do with the facts is a different story, but they must get the facts. So yes, you're right. When I give lectures, sometimes whether I say 3,000 or 300,000 or 3 million or 3 billion, it's just a big number for most of us. And that is because we do not have the tradition of going to museums. You know, you live probably in Stockholm. You have a museum of natural history. If you go there, where I was actually giving a lecture when the museum was opened many years ago, you can see a timeline of that evolution progression you mentioned. And that then you will see also how the face and the body change through time. So the answer to your question is not that I would go and convince everyone that it's easy to understand 2 million, 3 million years, but I would invite them to visit museums. You know, when one thing I would suggest, for example, now the Tigrayan community is unfortunately because of the war coming together, and we have these huge festivals that are happening in Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Minnesota, San Francisco, Copenhagen, Stockholm, Paris, you name it. I think when we do that, one thing we should do is, at least if there is one big museum in Stockholm, I think it should be one of the venues for the children. So they can just spend there like 2 hours visiting. That is the best way to open the mind. That is the best way for people to appreciate the facts. I'm not talking about whether they have this opinion or that opinion. But if a system or an individual denies the facts, it can only be a way to failure. So the reason why I gave you the example of the Vatican Church and how it's handling human evolution, where I'm actually invited in September to give a lecture. And then after that, I'm organizing a workshop called the Big Transformations or Major Transformations Through Time. That is the best way to answer those questions. So yes, it is challenging to discuss the time dimension, but there is no shortcut. We just have to use all the tools that we have to convey the message, because you know, data don't lie. I know you're probably a scientist, so data don't lie. Interpretations may lie. So what I suggest is, when we say 2 million years, I am as sure as when I board an airplane to go from Addis to Chicago or from Kampala to Nairobi. I am as 100% sure as I am. Otherwise, I wouldn't be boarding the flight, because it could, you know, fall and break apart.
Well, I think well, that's a lot of fascinating points there. And I think one of the reasons why people are generally hesitant to accept evolution, or the thing that you're saying, is that because if they were to accept those things, that would mean that they would have to change their opinions about other matters that they consider sacrosanct. So there is a consequence. I think there is a natural resistance that comes from that. But it's interesting that you mentioned the Vatican, and that the Vatican is happy working with you scientists, because I presume, maybe you'll tell me, Zeresenay, but you take evolution for granted. You accept that as a fact. I presume that is your standing point. Yeah. And that would run directly contrary to what the Vatican Church traditionally used to believe. Maybe, I don't know if they have changed now. So have they done some sort of reconciliation there in terms of what they believe, or they are more than happy to hold two contradictory views at the same time? So what happened there?
Well, so remember, if we go back in time, Galileo was prosecuted for saying that the Earth rotates around the sun, because at that point it was a geocentric view, meaning the Earth is the center of the planet, whereas he was saying no, it's heliocentric. And of course, that comes from Copernicus and other people who tried to answer that question. In the Vatican Church, the Catholic Church, was primarily responsible for prosecuting Galileo, who simply said the Earth rotates. And now, not only do we know the Earth rotates, but human beings can go to Mars, well, to the moon, and then they can send things to Mars. So I think the proof of burden is not on the scientists, but on the other side. Because when I was invited to go to the Vatican Church, I was not asked what type of denomination I have, what type of religion I have, I go there as a scientist. And at no time is that question raised within the Vatican. But I think the people there are smart enough that they cannot go away or they cannot ignore science. In fact, I think 20 of the 80 people, meaning the members of the academy, are Nobel laureates. One of them is a good friend of mine. She's a chemist, and her job is really to study the origin of life, going back to millions and hundreds of millions back. So you see that this is a combination of not denying the facts, but have a democratic relationship with people who have different opinions. I think it's Crowley could serve as a model. So when we go there, we are purely discussing science, scientific facts, and then publish monographs like this. The one that I attended is also published, and it's actually it's here, and what you see is a tool, a stone tool that goes back to 2 million years ago. Thus, again, this is published by the Pontifical Academy of Science also. So how they manage relative to their religion is their business. For me, what matters is, am I conveying as a scientist the scientific data, the scientific information that I know for a fact exists, is my point. Beyond that, even scientists, as you know, have different point of view, different religions, different background, different culture, etc., etc. So if you ask me specifically about the Vatican, however, I think it was John Paul II who declared that it's just not, there is no reason to deny the fact that evolution happened. How we explain it is maybe where they would differ, why it's happening and how it's happening. But that the Earth is 4 billion years old, they are taking it, they are accepting it. But really, as I told you, when I go there, I go as a scientist. I really focus on my messaging, which is scientific. And maybe over wine or beer, we have a more elaborate discussion that are slightly non-scientific, but that becomes personal opinions. So yeah, the church does accept evolution as a fact.
Well, I think if so, my point is that if you were to go to Ethiopia and make these points for us, you would be the Ethiopian Galileo, and you would be sort of maybe not in the same degree of trouble, but still there would be people who would find what you're saying very difficult to accept. And generally, actually, we could go into that because broadly our audience is Tigrayan, Ethiopian, Eritrean as well. And I think part of the problem there is that evolution is taught very, very badly. People have a very cartoonish understanding of what evolution is, which is why you hear people say, if human beings came from apes, why is it that we don't see human beings turn into, I don't know, something else, right? And they say that, and they use that sort of argument to refute the validity of evolution. I don't know if you see my point. And that tells you how badly taught evolution is. So maybe we can connect it to your discovery in terms of so you are saying that Salam and Lucy, in various degrees, ancestors. We used to be them, and 2 million years or so have elapsed, and now we are who we are, right? So there was a journey there. So what changed? Like, how did that evolution happen? How did we evolve from them to now? What happened? Like, so briefly.
Yeah. So those are very good questions, by the way. And trust me, I will not be the Galileo of our days in Ethiopia because I know my context. One thing about science that many people don't know is it's like it's a football game, a soccer game in this country. You guys call it football. It's like football. You can have Pele or Maradona and give them the ball. And they have a perimeter within which they have to manipulate the ball, right? The moment they go out of the perimeters, the arbiter, the ref, would stop them, because once they're out of the context, whether they dribble it with their fingers, tongues, heads, it doesn't make sense. So science must be interpreted within context. And one thing that is amazing about science that I like is it is an approach that is so doubtful with data. Other approaches are so confident without data, and that's a different. So, science is not about finding the truth. If you remember from your math classes in high school or college, there is this asymptote where when you have a parabola or something, it can come very close to the X or Y line, but it will never touch. But it comes very close as you go, as you change the numbers. So I would say that the relationship between science and the truth is asymptotic, and that's why it's very exciting. So if one is really after the ultimate truth, I think they should find another way. So the difference between those who say no and me is not about the fundamentals of the questions. It's about our views, our opinions, and opinions must be respected as they are. So that's point number one. So context is very important. You don't go around and wave your flags and then talk about this or that. In what context am I presenting my work? Is the person interested to begin with to learn? Have they made up their mind? If the answer is yes, well, God bless you. Please go, be happy. Why bother them? So all I'm telling you is that I see no contradiction, because as I told you, because the asymptotic relationship between science and the truth is what makes science exciting. So I just want to highlight that. So if people want to have a scientific answer, however, they must open up, they must listen to what scientists are saying. But as I said, scientists don't have the ultimate solution, because what's exciting about science is not the answer, it's not the eureka moment, but the process. Remember, some of my colleagues have looked for discoveries for 50 years and have not made discoveries. But when I speak to them, they are some of the happiest and the most satisfied, professionally speaking, the most satisfied people, because the journey, the odyssey, the process is what's exciting about science. And that's what I would like the children to know. This applies not to the things that I work on, but whether they want to be a chemist, a philosopher, or a physicist, or an engineer, or you name it, they must delve into the process. Science is not about all this imminent and then exciting discoveries. Imagine, even in my case, when I go to the remote places of the Afar deserts, and this is after completing my PhD in Paris at the age of 29, I was the only person, the only scientist in the middle of nowhere with just one car and accompanied by 4 locals in a very conflict-prone region between the Isas and the Afars. And unless I believed in the process of science, you would not have been interviewing me now, because it's very challenging. In fact, my family was not happy about it. They said, stop, just do something else. In fact, a friend of mine who is an artist, maybe you know him, Dereje Haile, and Dereje Habte is their name is. Dereje said, why don't you contribute and open a small shop for you rather than you going and risking your life in these remote places. That's what he said. So my point here is it is a process. It's the excitement of discoveries and innovations and inventions that drives both science forward, but the interest that you have. So to come back, I know this is a long answer to a short question. To put things on balance that are not comparable, as they say, apples and oranges, is not going to take us too far. So I would say let each of us examine what excites us, what intrigues us, what motivates us, and then find a way. Remember, people talk about the lack of development in Tigray, the lack of peace, the lack of tranquility, and the lack of peace and development, in short, democracy. And many people actually have, in many cases, some tangential approach to addressing those problems. I think most of it, in my view, is happening because we lack scientific approach to things, whether it's democracy, whether it is development, whether it's peace. Even, the Tigray army during the war, they did miracles, facing up all those countries and all the power that was before them. And they managed everything that a human being can do. But what made the difference, we know. It was science. Something came from up, there is nothing you can do. And that is science, it's nothing else. Drones are science. So much as we wanna live in our circle, satisfied with whatever long-held opinions that we have, which is great. I'm an anthropologist. I love culture. I love my tradition. I go out to Magala. I like dancing Tigrinya. I like my people. That's not the problem. But if I like my people, I have to also tell them the truth. I have to also openly explain what the way forward is if we are to make a difference. Otherwise, we will be, liking each other, worshiping each other, but we don't live in an island, as you know, these days. We're connected, whether we like it or not. And because we're connected, we become isolated if people around us don't like us. And that we saw it practically. So I would say high five to science, because that's lacking in especially in Africa and in our case in Tigray.
Well, I mean, for a society to advance, there should be people who tell the inconvenient truth, and that is what you're doing. So, so wonderful. But about you, how does someone born in Tigray, when the culture has sort of answers to some of the questions that you're trying to answer through research? Whether the answers are right or wrong is a different matter. But you grow up conditioned in that culture. How does someone in that environment grow up to become interested in paleo-anthropology? How did that journey happen? I'm just curious to know how you ended up doing PhD in these fields, and then to what you're doing now.
Well, actually, the answer is very short. The answer is serendipity. It was complete luck. It was complete chance, I would say. And that is, you're right. Growing up, I was an okay student. I was born in Tigray and moved after elementary school. I moved to Addis. That's where I did my high school. And then at the end, I went to Walaga. That's where I finished high school. And then I joined Arat Kilo to study geology. And all of this trajectory up until Arat Kilo University is a normal, the average kid from Ethiopia. That is the kid that wants to be a medical doctor or engineer or lawyer and things like that. That is great, but at the same time, it's also a problem because we're conditioned. I think you're right. We're conditioned to be lawyers, engineers, and medical doctors. But how many of us can we achieve that? Whereas there is this vast arena of things, this vast opportunity out there. Forget paleo-anthropology. No one knew about it. I didn't know about that until much later. But then I didn't know, for example, that one can study aeronautics. Because you say I'm conditioned. I didn't know one can study astronomy, because the way we're trained in elementary schools and high schools, it doesn't really favor, in my opinion, innovative and creative approach. I think later, maybe your generation, there was a school called Calamino or something like that in Magala.
Yeah, I went there.
Did you go there? Yeah. So you guys had a much better opportunity compared to what I had, even though I went to school in Addis. Even in Addis, we did not have that. I was in Bole at Teklay school, and we did not have that. So, bottom line, as you said, conditioned. I was just following the trajectory of finish elementary school, high school, and go to our Kilo. And then I wanted to study medicine, but I did not have the points because it was like 4.0 or something at that point. I think I had 3 point something. Then I joined geology. But I remember choosing geology as my major. And geology is the study of how the earth functions, the study of rocks, et cetera, et cetera. And I took only one course of paleontology during my undergrad. And here is where it comes tricky. This is the last phase of graduates during the Derg era. After that, we had EPRDF. It was 82 Ethiopian calendar, which is +8, around 90 or 91. During the Derg, there were many bad things, of course, but if you graduate, you are guaranteed a job. And the way you got your job is you go, and then it's like a lottery system. That would be a lottery system where it says Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Rift Valley system, blah, blah. And mine happened to be, the three of us actually, the Ministry of Culture. Remember, I studied geology, but I was assigned completely by luck at the Ministry of Culture. And I remember I was so mad. I think I may have cried, because I studied geology to go to a petroleum company or mining company, something that would give me more money. So I remember saying, why am I going to be, this place where there are priests and deacons and people who do history? What am I going to do? So, but then, there is no other option. You have to survive. So I was assigned with my two other friends at the National Museum of Ethiopia. And our first office was the place where you have all these fossils from where Lucy's from South Omo and all of this. So starting there, I started interacting with the fossils, and then, this famous scientist, like the guy who discovered Lucy and others, started coming to do field work from the US, France. And that interaction is where my passion for what I have was born. So it is not a childhood dream, because I didn't know what paleoanthropology was. Unlike you guys, who probably had a sense of what Lucy was when you were in Calamino or in high school. So I didn't know that. So that's why I told you it's complete luck. It's serendipity that led me to study paleoanthropology. But here is the bottom line. But once in, I was really so intrigued, so passionate about what was happening at the National Museum of Ethiopia with all these researchers coming from all over the world. My friends and I, my other friend is also a geologist now, a professor at Addis Ababa University, we really started educating ourselves and really intriguing the big scientists and asking questions, whether it's silly or not. and we started doing field work with them. And then I was lucky because only a year and a half after working at the National Museum, a scholarship came to go to France. And imagine I don't speak French. And this became another new world again. I said, you're going to France? Really? Okay, I will go to France. Not knowing a single word of French. So I went, I ended up in a place called Vichy. I learned the French language for 9 months. And then after that, I joined a place called University of Montpellier in southern France. I did my master's. And then I went up to Paris to do my PhD at the Sorbonne University. So all of this is happening within a span of 5 years. So I had to learn the French language and write my dissertation in French, a thick dissertation, yes, which is, yeah, which is this.
Now you're putting me to shame. I have been in Sweden for almost a decade, and my Swedish is so basic. But
well, because
continue.
you can manage to live in Sweden in English. In France, when I was there, the French didn't really speak English, and it became a question of survival. So
But when you went from Ethiopia to France, did you know that you were going to do your studies in French,
yes,
or was
yes.
it all right? Okay.
I was told, and I was sent to French language. Very intensive, actually. I was lucky. I would say, if I would reminisce and go back in time, what phase of your life was most exciting? One of them would be the French language school, where you had all those people from Japan, Sweden and Canada and Mali and all those people, new friends. And remember, this is during most of my life was during the Derg. So we were not really exposed. Even movies were censored. You couldn't really watch all the movies that were out in the West. And of course, you grow up saying Ethiopia is the best country. The greenest and all that, and that completely is trashed when you go there because it's not true. As you know, we are very chauvinist, almost bordering racist. But then that exposure with two other people puts that in perspective. So the French.
But I'm sorry to cut you off, Zeresenay, but I think that's it ties in with what you mentioned earlier. You say that when you go to, you follow science, you follow to where it leads you, even though sometimes it might lead you to uncomfortable truths, right, about humanity, about the nature of us, especially for someone who grew up believing certain things. And even the journey from Ethiopia to France, and having views bordering of races, I think that's spot on. I think the question is, what do you do when you are faced with that sort of new reality? Do you accept the new reality and adapt yourself, or do you continue resisting the new reality? I think that is an important distinction, and many people don't find it easy to adapt to the new reality, and that applies in science and in accepting new cultural realities as well. And by the look of things, it would have been easy for you to accept the new reality and you adapted yourself to the new situation. But continue.
I always remain grounded. My Tigrayan background at that point, my Ethiopian background were never shaken because you need the foundation. But at the same time, I have questioned many things that I took for granted, and that is, I told you, we were brought up thinking that Ethiopia was the greenest country on earth, which is not true. We felt that, we almost felt that we were the best people. We thought that we were very handsome people. Maybe it's true, but it was not
but
really.
You were the sexiest scientist.
That's later.
They were on something in your case.
But I'll tell you, even though we felt that we were the most handsome people, it was not easy at the beginning to find girlfriends. So that means that it defeats the entire purpose. So because you may look nice, but you don't have the social skills. the informational conversation that you can engage with people who are quote unquote civilized or know what's happening in the world. When they mentioned an actor, because we were watching German and Russian movies growing up, we were completely cut off from the world. So this aura that you grow up with, it has to be tamed, I would say, meaning prune it so you can maintain the facts that you have a long and very proud history. True. We have people that would not waver if they were to be attacked. True. You name it, etc., etc. But at the same time, there is a lot of BS also. So what I say is that recognizing who we are, recognizing our uniqueness is one thing, but also remembering that other people also have their own uniqueness and their own pride. You know, when you talk to Iranians, for example, I had never met an Iranian before I went to the French language in France. Their depth of knowledge about the world, their heritage is so much that it somehow dwarfs what you're saying. So what I'm saying is, it's good to have the ego that we have to the extent that it can serve us positively, but then at some point it needs to be tamed and stopped. Otherwise, it leads to actually the disaster that we're facing now in Ethiopia, because we feel that as a group, as a country, we have all the things, but we also, within the categories, whether you are Amhara, Tigray, or Oromo, you also maintain that. And it goes all the way down to the families and the individuals, and ultimately it's not going to be favorable for democracy and harmony and living together. So my bottom line is, really the French language has allowed me to question, to strengthen the qualities that I already had growing up, but also to question some of the flawed understanding of myself and my background. And therefore, you were asking me earlier, how did you reconcile with the way I grew up and the type of job I do? Is the arbiter, the rough is data and science, I think, for me. When it comes to human relationship, I think recognizing that the other person is equal to you really helps. It takes you so far, which in many ways, therefore, I would say that now, if you ask me what I think, I'm a humanist. I believe in humanism, and that is basically respect the other person as much as you'd respect yourself, whether they have this type of color or facial features or hair. Remember, and this is really important, and I'm going to say it, when we see some type of people, the reactions that you see on people's face in some of our communities is just disgusting.
So parochial, yeah.
Yeah, it is disgusting. Even from a religious point of view, it's disgusting. Because according to religion, they were created in the name of, in the face of God, right? But even if you put that to the side, we are all human beings. And that really was, for me, crystallized at the French language. So not only did I pick up really French language, which I speak as much as I speak it's as good as my English, but I really learned a lot about other people. And learning about other people gives you so much new windows. It makes you in many ways a global citizen, where you would look at the human being, and without any judgment, you run away into conversation with them. So you then pick up whatever good things they have to say without any biases. So that was a very enriching experience. It has opened up a new, many new windows. And I would say it has made me a better person, but it's a process. Of course, I'm still trying to improve, like all of us. But that also really dovetails to the type of work that I do. meaning that I have the scientific evidence now, both genetically and from the anatomically and fossil-wise, that we are indeed the same people. We all strive to be happy. We all strive to develop, to succeed. And what is missing, especially in our tradition, is to really accept the other view, to accept the other opinion, and try to find a consensus so we can all flourish at the same time. And that's why I say, that's why I also reacted when the war. You wouldn't see me in political discussions or other things before the war. I don't think, maybe you saw my TED talk, but I was not party to those things. But there was a threshold where I cannot just sit and watch. So the reason why I came out publicly during the war, like many of us, is because it went beyond my imaginations. I told you about some of the reservations that I have about our traditions and cultures, but then it transcended that and basically became what we know as at least ethnic cleansing and the genocide. So all of that is connected, and that's why I like my job, because it really gives me this huge, vast window to look at all of us first, to look at Africa, to look at Ethiopia, and then my bottom line now has become, for the past 2-3 years, Tigray, and we should all do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, part of the reason why I really wanted to come on here, Zeresenay, was because I know that you have an all-encompassing view on matters, because you study humanity, you study events that happened over a long span of time, and people who are invested in those sorts of realms have a wide perspective, and I think you have the kind of perspective that would be so useful to many people in Africa, I mean, Africa, and especially in Ethiopia, who seem to have made a habit of finding themselves in war every now and then. But we're going to come to that towards the end. I think now I'm going to have you linger on the sort of the essence of education, because that is really what we were talking about. And I'm going to make a very sweeping statement, and some people will think it's not right, but I think you will see where I'm coming from. Generally, in Ethiopia, the way education is it's meant to train you to be able to do certain things. It's not designed to make you think, to make you take in new information and reflect on the new information and change your belief and your views. That is not really the purpose of education in Ethiopia generally, which is why you don't see people being, what is the word, being dynamic in the face of new reality, in the face of new information. But I think you are an exception in that regard, because the story you're telling me is that you would come clashing to a new reality, and you would find a way to reconcile yourself and your beliefs with the new reality, and then you would move on, which I think is part of the reason why education has been easy for you, education in its true sense. I wonder if it is the result of the education system that he had back then being different, or if it is a case of serendipity, like you said earlier, or if there are other factors that I'm not taking into account.
Yeah, I think there is one short answer. Questioning is what helps. Questioning. It does not have to be in a controversial way, but questioning knowledge is what education is all about. The reason why you go to school is because when you look at this, you think it contains orange if you're used to drinking orange with this. But then you go to school, oh, by the way, yes, you used to drink orange with this, but what we have in this bottle now is water. That's all education is all about. It's questioning your state of knowledge. There is nothing else. That's why when you finish grade 1, you go to grade 2, and then grade 3, etc., etc. You're being questioned. Oh, do you know these things that are supposed to be known by grade 1? That's what tests are, what exams are. But this one is more formal. But as individuals, I think it's very important to question our state of knowledge, especially if we want to be useful to our communities. We have to tell them, to the extent that we can, what we think is true and what we think is relevant. I'm not, again, saying we go around with the truth and with flags. That's not going to help us. What I'm saying is what we think is true, but what we think is relevant. Because there are many true things that are irrelevant, and there are hard truths that must be told. So that's number one. So questioning is really fundamental. So what helped me, if you feel that I have made some success, is I, of course, do my homework, meaning I go from grade 1 to grade 2. I go from undergrad to postgraduate, and then I do all the dissertations and stuff like that. But that's not enough. All that would have to be placed in a context, in the right context. If I live in France, in Paris, to not understand Paris, but try to benefit from what Paris offers, is contradictory. Because you cannot practice the fruits that you get from Paris without understanding how Paris functions. The language is a case in point. You cannot go to Tigray as a Ferengi, enjoy Sa'id without understanding that you don't really move your bottoms. Because if you do that, it's impolite in Tigray, right? So what we're trying to do in many ways is we're trying to do Sa'id of Paris or in New York or in Washington and vice versa. It doesn't work that way because everything must be contextualized. And that's why actually I insist kids who are growing here that happen to be Tigrayans must embrace both. I think we should educate them about their history, their language, their culture. And I do that. I have a series of lectures, actually, if you had the opportunity to look at. Working with my friend Galaudios, we are trying to educate them about the history of Tigray. But there is another fact also. Those kids are Tigrayans, true, but they are Americans also. And if they are going to be successful Tigrayans, they must be successful Americans at the same time. Otherwise, they will be like, if they forget who they are as Tigrayans, they will be a desert traveler without a compass because they need some bearings, some directions. But if they forget that they are Americans or Swedes, they will be the fish out of the waters, meaning they cannot breathe and they will die. So our job should be to provide them, to give them both a compass so they can navigate, but also the waters so they can survive. Sometimes what we do is we give them one or the other. And I'm not saying this is easy. And I'm not telling you I have done this. But that should be the goal. Personally, it has served me well. I still remain grounded as a Tigrayan. But I also go out and do what I like if I am in San Francisco or in Paris or in New York. So how can we find a nice sweet spot that would accommodate? This is the challenge that we have as immigrants. Remember, this is not a challenge just for you and I. Even the white guy who is in Arkansas or in Virginia had the same challenges because their parents had to come from Europe also. So that's why you have these Irish communities. You have the Israelis, of course, other Iranian communities. So when it comes to education, therefore, yes, they should get the grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and graduate school if needed. but there is a lot that needs to be done on the side also. And that is where it becomes intriguing, especially if we are in the diaspora. I think if going back to Tigray though, uh, I still need to. I wish I could visit your school, Calamino. I'm impressed by students that came from that school, when the few people that I know. So, what was success and what was failure at Calamino is it could be a PhD dissertation. I think someone has to do a PhD dissertation work on what was working at Calamino, what was not working. And then if you can combine what worked but fix what didn't, you have there a beacon of hope. And there is no need for us to bring professors from New York or from Paris. I think that's what I would suggest that we do in Tigray, especially. In addition to what I said earlier, hiding data is a path to death, intellectually speaking. But how do we present the scientific data in a manner that is consistent with our culture, with our traditions, without compromising both, but also without being beholden to things that don't work, we know. I grew up in Aksum up until elementary school. And I saw my mother's praying 7 days every month, Melela. I never saw that bringing water. And that's a fact. And I say it. So what I say is, because we know that, let's continue our prayers in a new way that we see fit, but let's not fool ourselves, because that's not going to bring water. So yeah, as I told you, hard facts must be told. Otherwise, we'll be fooling each other.
Yeah,
And
I think that's a very important point. That hard and uncomfortable factors must be told to the people, because you made the point that the only way we could advance, we could move forward. I think to the extent that there is a question there, it is about the how. How do we tell people? How do we find a way of telling people new realities, new factors, without making them sort of defensive? I think that is the sort of the sweet spot that nobody has really found in Tigray. What kind of scaffolding, what kind of tools, what kind of mechanisms do you use to convey new ideas, new scientific findings, new research findings to the people?
yeah,
I don't know if you have thought about that, but I think that is where the problem lies in.
exactly. And it's the same thing, actually, in politics. The separation of state and church must be respected, because politicians are smart people. If it works for them, they don't care. They will use religion to advance their goals. That's what their job is to advance their goals. Sometimes I get surprised when people, Kusto Sultani for to you. Of course, that's what his job is. So the sweet spot for me is first respect. Respect the other. But respect is contextual. When you go when you're at the airport, when you go to the bathroom, you have the men's sign and the women's sign. You don't go to the women unless you're a woman, and vice versa. That is rules and respect, two things. So we need rules and respect. If someone goes to school and starts preaching things that are not validated by the school system, it is a breach of the system. It must be stopped. If someone goes to a church and does things that disrespect the church, that is also offline. So we need rules and respect, I would say, whenever we engage with each other, because we're human beings, we have imaginations. Remember, human beings are the most symbolic and imaginative species that had ever existed, ever. That's why you put jewelries or ornaments or paintings on our face. Look how beautiful the ladies in Tigray are when they have the konano and everything. Why do you need that? That's just symbolism. It's imagination. It's transcending beyond just what do I eat, where do I sleep. So because people have imaginations, the only way to bring us all together is rules and respect. Otherwise, imagine when you are in a hall, you have 100 people, think of what every single individual is thinking. It is just an array of network. You can even think of like this magnetic complex web of things that's happening. There is no way you can control that. That's why we need rules and respect. So that's one thing. That's how I would convey the messages. And that's why I insisted earlier, the context. That's why our engagement with the Vatican Church is curved and it's contextualized. That's why even in democracy, you have 3 systems of government. The developed countries that we aspire to be like have done nothing, but they just have rules and respect. That's what they have. If you go to Sweden, you may have a neighbor who is a Swede. He may not like you, but as you know, he cannot even knock at your door without your permission. That is what? Respect and rules. So we need that. It's going to take time, of course. I'm not saying this is easy, but we need rules and respect. And you cannot implement these without asking hard questions and also telling some hard facts. Otherwise, we will be cajoling each other. We will be, self-congratulating, auto-congratulating ourselves, and we know where that took us. We know where we are today. As you know, in most parts of the world today, there is no hunger. In most parts of the world, I would say. In fact, our people today, you can say, are at their lowest. And we know they are smart people, they're hardworking people, they have heritage, they have history. And the reason why we are at the pit, in the trenches, is because we failed to tell hard facts 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago. And I'm not going to allow, at least to the extent that I have platforms like this, I'm not going to allow that pass by, because that's you can blame Getachew or Tzadkan on Woodward. That's really minimal. They are also as hopeful, as concerned, as confused, and as worried as I am. I know that. Even more, actually, because the hot potato is in their hands. I'm not saying they should not be criticized. They should, of course, as politicians. But the problem is deeper. And that's why we all have to come together, tell hard facts, and call a spade. At least people like me and you can afford to do that, I think, at least.
Well, I am happy that you have the bravery to tell the truth. I think I can only wish that you could go to Tigray and do the same in Tigrinya to the people. I think there is a there's a desperate need for people like you who are happy to go against the tide, whether that is on religious matters, on cultural matters, on political matters, on other matters. I think there is a need for setting the record straight, to use modern lingo, and that's a wonderful thing. But I'm going to take you back to your research. It's a strange interview in a way, taking you meanderingly to different places. But you go to Paris, you write your dissertation, and then you decide to go to Afar, which is how come you discovered Salam. And I read somewhere that actually that expedition was it wasn't something that other people saw as a commonsensical
Yeah,
move. You had to follow your hunch feeling.
yeah,
Why did you feel that was the right thing to do?
yeah. So remember, when I finished my PhD at the age of 29, still relatively young, uh, I had, like all of us, the options are out there. You could stay there, you could do something else, you could try to go to North America. Of course, you could go back. And what I did is I will go back. I graduated here on June 16th, 98, and I left Paris for good. رعوي تقليلي, as we say it, September 4th or 3rd, for New Year's anyway. That's it. I said bye-bye to Paris. I had no intentions of staying in Paris.
So 98 is during the Ethiopian-Eritrean
Exactly.
war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The war, Ethiopian-Eritrean war. And what I did is I'll go back, and I said I will not be officially employed, but I will develop a new project in an area that had never been explored before. That's what I said. And I'm saying this without having the resources, no vehicle, I mean, $0 except my own savings. And then I went back. In fact, I was staying with my brother. Even after becoming a doctor, I was sort of semi-dependent on my brother because he let me stay at his place.
You did PhD only to move in with your family. That's
Exactly.
success story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I said, okay, if I go back and I join the bureaucratic system, it will be very difficult for me to develop a new project in some remote places, which takes resources, time, and you can be gone for months and months. So long story short, so what I did is I went there. I started exploring the archives to find a new site. And there was a site which many people avoided because that's the epicenter of the conflict between the Afars and the Isas. So in short, if you start in Addis, you go through Nazareth, Awash, blah, blah, and then you go to a place called Adaitu. And from Adaitu, which is at 500 kilometers from Addis, you go to the Awash River off-road. And the road, I had to make it myself. There was no car that was driven to the spot before I actually drove the car. So I was the first person to, I remember the cattle, the goats and sheep were running away from this white carnivore because the Land Cruiser was a white, they had never seen something like that. So I went there and I started the project. So I think if you ask me what drove me to do that, it's consistent with what I was telling you when I went to France, not knowing anything, as explore France in Paris. Went to the French language, zero knowledge, go ahead and do it. And then paleontology, something that I had never thought when I was a kid, do it. And then went to the University of Sorbonne. It's a challenging school, you may know. So that was also accomplished. So I think by then I had become almost addict to new conditions. So when I started going out to the Afar, therefore, it took an enormous effort to go through the bureaucratic hurdle. And remember, at that point, the Afar region, the capital was in Asaita, not Samara. In fact, Samara did not exist even as a small village. I'm telling you, there was nothing in Samara. Now it's a big mega city now. There was nothing.
Yeah, Samurai is sort of the APRDF government's creation.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So when you see people now complaining about things, it's a different story. And then when I started interacting with the locals, at the end of the field season, they would ask me for old boots or shirts and all that. But now they are asking me, what is my iPhone 3 or iPhone 5 or iPhone 10? So, to the credit of the PRDF, they have transformed that region. But that's besides. So the main challenge then was, when you go as an outsider to the site, which is called Dikika, the two conflicting parties, the ISAs and the Afars, converge. Because if something happens while I'm there, they will have the attention of the federal government, because it's a bone of contention between the two. So it just became very difficult. I was shot at actually 3-4 times. I could see the bullets, falling next to me, but it didn't stop me. I was
Did
just.
they think you were incompetent, or it was a stray bullet?
Well, they were actually shooting at me because it's from distance. Because if you are with the ISAs, the Afars will shoot at you. If you are with the Afars, the ISAs will shoot at you. So it's part of the game, Well, part of the tragedy, I would say. So anyway, after long discussions, I became a very good diplomat at that point. I think that was my training as a diplomat and as a negotiator also. So I started my work. So the challenges that are non-scientific challenges. So for example, I was the driver and also the cook. So I would wake up in the morning at 5 a.m., cook for everyone, and then feed everyone, and then put everyone in the car, go survey, come back. At lunchtime, I have canned food. I would feed everyone also. So for like 2 months, I was a cook, the driver, and the scientist, and doing everything. Because when you're a young scientist, really no one would really take you seriously. People would not like to join your projects. Now, like, I receive a plethora of emails. Dear professor, can I join your team? I have. So when I started, we were like 5 people, myself and a local, and then 4 ISAs. Now, when I go, it's 50 people, 5-6 Land Cruisers, a big Toyota car, and all that. So it's completely different. So I don't want to delve too much on this one, but what I'm telling you, the thing that
No, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, the thing that pushed me to go forward with this work is I was determined that is going to be my life. That's number one. Number two, I was determined to really create the first Ethiopian-led paleo-anthropological research team, because prior to that, it was all foreign-led projects. And then the third one is I will take whatever it takes. So, for example, the first 2 seasons, if you go now with me, we have showers. I have 5 cooks, 5 drivers. I don't do anything but science when I go there. But then, because I was doing everything to facilitate and to carry less stuff, because I only had 1 vehicle, I would camp next to the river, the Awash River. So I would take shower in the Awash River, which is infested with crocodiles and hippos. So sometimes you'd take your shower and run away to your little camp, your tent. But then I thought that was smart. But then what happened one night is in the middle of the night, I see that I was wet completely. The tent was wet. I said, what's happening? And then I opened my tent. You see, the dry bed river that was completely dry was filled with rain that had rained in Bati, in the highlands. And we were completely flooded, and half of my kitchen items were taken. And the only way to go back and save my life was to tie the Land Cruiser vehicle against a big tree and jump over it, and then go through the gallery forest, the woodland, which is very unpleasant, because all the frogs and the insects and all that are like awake because of the rain that rained. This is at 3 a.m. in the morning. And then I managed to go to the river banks, and guess what? The current of the Awash River is so high that the crocs and the hippos were also out. And you can see their eyes, and you have their 3 species, Homo sapiens, crocodiles, and hippos, staring at each other because they were under the mercy of nature, which is the Awash River. And that lasted for 3 hours. And because my blanket and everything was taken, it was so cold. And the Afars, even at that point, said, you know what? We're happy to work with you, but we cannot work from here. We have to go to the ridges, which would make it difficult. Then you would have to transport water. So it's just like I'm just giving you like a snippets, a snapshot of the type of challenges that you face. These things never go to your CV. So because you said this was a conversation, that's what I'm telling you the stories. But so ask the questions, determination, and really feel that that's your life. I think that's important. If you are vacillating between things, oftentimes it's not going to work. So it's not for everyone because it could be tedious and it could be boring because, as I told you, unless you believe in the process, in the odyssey, in the journey, the process is very tedious. Sometimes it's dangerous also. I think getting good training in France with some of the most prominent people helps. It's very inspiring. But the determination to create the first Ethiopian-led project was exciting, I think. And then after 2-3 years with the discovery of Salam, I started some acknowledgements and recognition. So I started to expand my team. And my team now is beyond recognition. You know, I have so many sub-teams work on geology, archaeology, paleontology, you know, ethnography, etc. I even managed to find time to talk about, you know, Tigray and the things that we're talking about now. So yeah, it is a journey. I would say it's a journey. It's a long journey. Yeah. And it's very exciting.
I think you have awakened the child in me, Zeresenay. And if you have some time, I'm going to ask you questions that a child might ask you. One thing that I have always sort of been fascinated by when I see on the news, you know, archaeologists going around and digging up earth, and people like you, where do they get their cues from? Like, what is dictating you? Do you just go and start digging up, or is there something that tells you that there is a probability that there could be something significant there?
Yeah, it's a geological report because, you know, the things that we work on are preserved in sedimentary rocks. So as you know from your basic geography, you have igneous rock, metamorphic rock, and sedimentary rock. And if you have some sedimentary rocks from geological reports, people who go out there, not for paleontology, but for petroleum and mining, they will do a report on what type of sediments you have in a given area. They will also give you an idea of how old the sediments are. So if you have sedimentary rocks and they are dated between around 4, 5, 6 million years ago, it is a place to start. Once you have that, then you can use satellite imagery now that actually can help you remotely how much of the exposed sediments have potential for the type of work that we do. But that is really it. Once you have that, you have to go and walk the walk. There is no shortcut. You have to spend months and months. The first season, I was out there for 6.5 months. That's crazy. It's very hot. It's remote. Very rudimentary diet. Now when I go, it's maybe a month and a half or 2. So those are the main clues. Geological reports and satellite imagers will help you. But also, if there were previous work by other researchers, like in the South Omo, for example, there were scientists from France and Germany that were in Southern Omo in 1901. They had some indications that there were some fossils, so people went there to do so. Previous work, geological reports, and satellite imagers. So when I went back, actually, as I told you from Paris, I did not have a formal job, but I told the Ministry of Culture, I will serve you for free. You can send me to any project I will serve, but then when I develop my project, you would support me. And they said yes. In fact, one of the assignments that was given to me was to go to Aksum and then dig down the foundation upon which now the obelisk that came from Aksum is standing. And actually, there is an interesting anecdote there. So it was two archaeologists from France, and then myself looking at the stratigraphy, meaning the type of the layers of rocks. And we dug deeper, it's about 7 meters through the platform. And then at that point, we hit the bedrock, meaning beyond that, you cannot go. It's like the hard rock, that's called the bedrock. And then, but we wanted to also test, have you been to Aksum? Yeah, so if you go from between the Hawalti and the church, there is a square. So we wanted to make sure that what we saw at the platform where the one that came from Rome is standing, we went next to the roundabout and started digging a trench to make sure that our observations were replicable. And we had all helmets. We were wearing helmets, and there was this old man. Really, there was the two French guys and I with a helmet. He can't see. He was saying, I'll say it in Tigray. Atum leaw naikadam kaya aklukum lawd matuatalom. He was just kept saying, "You thieves," as if it was not enough that you took a lot before. What the hell are you doing? And then I pulled out my helmet. I said, "Aboy tiger nada. Why nahanadi ka balhalum?" And then so he gave me that assignment. But anyway, we finished the job, and then the Hawalti came, and then was put where it is now. And after 3 or 4 years, I went back to Aksum to see my mom, who unfortunately passed after. And then I went to visit the site. And, in Aksum, as in many places, you have those little kids telling you, serving as a tour guide. And I said, okay, can you tell me about the history of Aksum? I don't know anything. And he says, well, in 19 blah blah, Nugus, King Sheba, no, Queen Sheba, no, the entire, the entire gestalt. He tells me, and then he says, in 98, he says, the Ferengis came and dug this trench. That's where I was digging, and then they found this tunnel that takes to Asmara, but then they were told to stop it because of the war, because this is in 99 or 98. And I asked him, how many were there? No, there were so many Ferengis here digging. So he's telling this Aksum kid, is telling the Aksum kid who did actually the job, that the job was done by the Ferengis. And that was really a first
but that is actually, that's interesting, but that's how mythologies set food, right?
Exactly. And that's why I strongly believe.
No, interestingly, actually, I was in Aksum in a way not really related, but I and a friend of mine were in Aksum about 3-4 months ago, and we were having a conversation with this lady who was praying. There is a place where there is a sort of a plank of Est Mary and all that, and they pray around that. And the reason that is that specific place is a holy place is because people believe that Mary came all the way from Israel to Aksum, and she rested under a shade. That's the whole point of it. And we asked if she believed that Mary came all the way from Israel, how she thought Mary came all the way to Aksum, by what mode of transport, was it by flight, and she didn't want to answer, and she suspected that we were trying to ruin her party. But it's interesting when you
that's
have
fine,
those sort of conversation with people.
Yeah, and legends and mythologies must be preserved, and we have many of them. I think they should be documented. But the point I was making is that even a kid like him who did the job and is alive standing before him, the kid who is giving me the tour guide still is in the state of others do those things, the Ferengists do those things. And then I didn't want to spoil his story, so I didn't tell him it was me. But then I went to the Ministry of Culture office, the tourism office, and I told them what the facts were. So I think one thing I'm thinking now actually is in the near future, I will probably go back to Aksum and set up trainings for tour guides, whereby they can, I think they should continue the mythology. You know, mythology and legends are great. I think that's not the point. But they also should understand that there is a fact that needs to be told. Not that I did the work, but really so for example, I know how tall or how short the obelisk is. I know how much of it is below the ground, etc., etc. And beyond and above what you see, the 3 or the 2, there are so many in that small perimeter. There are so many that are fallen, and there is so much to be told. So I'm trying to organize some type of workshop, hopefully soon. But I'm trying to connect to what you were asking me earlier, and that is we want to maintain our culture, even mythologies and legends. There is not every country has its own narrative. Every place has its own narrative. That's not the point. But as you know from Sweden, they have museums. They have archaeological sites. I remember in Norway, I visited this place from, I think, 9,000 years ago. And they have this wonderful outdoor museum to tell their own story. This is only 10,000. Imagine. We have so much more. So in that same place, you can do both the myth and the legend, but also the fact, because ultimately they enjoy the Swedes or the Norwegians, they enjoy their history. They're very proud people, as you know. They're not expressive as we are because it's tamed, but they're very proud of their heritage, who they are, etc., etc. And they should be. They're very successful people, but at the same time, they don't dwell and continue to live in it. I think the sort of the tragedy in Africa and Ethiopia and Tigray is that because we fear of the new, because of the fear of the fresh, we tend to retract and find comfort and solace in the past, even though it may not be in our best interest. So there must be some type of balance, like we were saying earlier, between finding comfort in your past, but finding comfort in your present also. Otherwise, we become people of the past. And I don't want to be people of the past. I am present, and I want to be the person of the future, if possible.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the very fundamental points that you made earlier, Zeresenay, that the human mind has an infinite capacity, and that we are more than capable of, number one, dealing in facts, and number two, cherishing our cultural heritage, religious heritage, and other on the other aspects of our lives. And I think one of the problems generally is that people tend to believe one thing could come only at the cost of the other. And I think that is the misconception that we have to sort of attack, and we have to find a way of addressing generally. Feel free, there's a night to say enough. I have had you, I think, for 2 hours now, but I'm going to ask you one or two sort of big picture questions before I say, before I see you off. One is, I think broadly speaking, what you are trying to do in your research is go back to try to understand the future of humanity. I think that seems to be what is happening. I'm curious to know, what are the things that you believe we don't, as of yet, know about human beings and maybe other primates, that you hope to know by doing the research that you're doing? But in terms of more broadly, you don't have to go to details.
Yeah. So for me, one thing that intrigues me is how this being thing evolved, our brain. And because it has become a machine that seems to be non-stoppable, the brain that our ancestors like Lucy had 3 million years ago was only 350 or 400 cc. Now it's 1400 cc. So this major change to become, as I said, the most dominant, successful, and invasive species that we are today is going to be dependent on how we use our brain, how we interact with other animals and our environment. So I think what I would like to understand going back is what was the impact of the environment on our evolution, and how did we impact our environment in return? And what can we learn from that process and apply it to today? Remember, I told you I don't want to live in the past. Even though the person who is actually so passionate about the past, my goal is to live the present and then leave a legacy for the future. So I think understanding the brain better, so we actually understand our activities and its impact on other creatures and our planet is really fundamental. But if you really ask me one takeaway, especially because mostly our audience may be from Tigray, is really our people are in a big quagmire. It's a disaster that happened to us. It's even more. And they've been calling for the three things for a long time: peace, development, and democracy. And the things that we observe in terms of peace, it's shaky. Democracy is shaky. Development is shaky. So how can we come together, really avoiding this little, minuscule rabbit hole activities, call it kebab net, whatever. For someone like me who tries to be global, to go to be Black and then African and then Ethiopian and then Tigrayan and then go to some Ushet is just almost insulting. So my takeaway is, let's think big, that we are all human beings. Even we're not even just Tigrayans. Actually, that would be reducing us to a smaller portion. So I think understanding that we are all humans is going to serve us as Tigrayans to live peacefully within Tigray, but also with others. The Oromos, the Amharas, the Eritreans, all of that. Also, it doesn't stop there, other Africans and beyond. So I would say that really having this attitude towards ourselves as human beings, and really positive attitude towards being Tigrayan, being African, being human, is a unifying factor. Wherever we are, I think we should celebrate humanity, because humanism is good for all of us.
Yeah, I think I have always wondered if people could have scientific literacy, they might have less appetite for war. I mean, there is no way that somebody who understands physics, for instance, someone who understands the thing that you have been explaining, for instance, the fact that all of us, whether Africans or Europeans or Asians, came from the same ancestor. I think if people had a proper appreciation of that, there is no way that war would be, never mind the first resort, even the last resort. I think there is no way war would make sense if people had that sort of understanding. And maybe one of the things that people in Ethiopia should try to do in terms of changing their society for good is creating some sort of science literacy. I think that actually might be something that should be taken seriously. I don't know what you think about that, but it's something that I have always thought about.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better. I think you're right, spot on. And, running away from data and the information is actually a suicidal act. It's basically, that something exists, but you're denying that it doesn't exist. And it's there to stay, and it's come tackle you at one point or not.
And one more final question, and this is a very strange question because normally professors start their lecture by defining their terms, but now I'm going to ask you to define your terms that we have been using. So I think we have used the term paleontology, we have used the term anthropology, and we have used the term paleo-anthropology, and that is actually what you are. What are they?
So paleontology, in short, means paleo means ancient, ont means life, logy means study. So the study of ancient life, be it animals or plants. So paleontology is a study of plants and animals that have lived in the past. That's what it means. And a subset of that is because human beings belong to the animal kingdom. That's why they're called Homo sapiens. It is a subset of paleontology. Paleo-anthropology means paleo means ancient, anthro means human, logy means study. So the study of ancient humans is called paleo-anthropology. What makes paleo-anthropology unique is when you study humans, you just don't study their biology. So if you study plants, you study their physiology, anatomy, etc. If you study a giraffe, you study how long the neck is, you study their anatomy and their physiology. But humans, you study their biology, of course, how I look, how tall I am, short I am, what type of features I have on my face, the texture of my hair, etc. But we also study their culture, the type of stone tools they use, the type of ornaments they put on their body, their tradition, all that. So that then takes you to archaeology, ethnography, and then of course when you study them as societies, it's called sociology, etc. So the word anthropology is the study of humans broadly defined, but anthropology can be their biology, physical biologists like myself, or it could be their societal structure, social anthropology, or it could be cultural anthropology, it could be linguistic anthropology, though there are so many subsets. But in short, paleoanthropology is a study of ancient humans, paleontology is a study of ancient life. That's the short definition.
Well, wonderful. Now we can't be accused of using jargon. We have defined our terms, so that's wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Zeresenay. I have always known that you were a serious scientist, but it's a new discovery for me to know that you have such a contagious love for life and for science, and that has inspired even me. And I hope it's going to have the same effect on our listeners. So thank you for that, and especially the fact that you wrote your thesis in French. It has sort of struck me at my core. Maybe it's too late for me to write my thesis in Swedish, but I will try to do something with my Swedish.
Bottom line, thank you so much for having me. And I know this has been in the works for a long time. Sorry, I didn't get back to you earlier. But
no, it's fine. Absolutely fine.
I hope you understand that I was.
I only hope that we're going to have many more conversations, because I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I'm absolutely sure that a lot of people are going to love it. So thank you very much for today, and I really hope we're going to have more conversations, because we touched on a lot of things that we could have gone into details. Science, how science is done, evolution, how it's understood. A lot of things that we might. Go into some considerable detail another time. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and have a good day.
You too.